great gift to have the gift of being alive and being able to have conversations like this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Practical Shaman podcast. I'm Renee Baribeau, your host and author of the Hay House book, Winds of Spirit, A Pilgrim's Guide to Walking Wisdom, which is kind of like in the vein of the author we're speaking of today, with some really transformational questions, and the Windwalker Wisdom Oracle, which was up for some awards, won some, didn't win some, but that's just how it goes. And I'm currently under contract with my new book called The Practical Shaman, which is kind of a culmination of some of the years of my work. And our guest today and I follow a somewhat similar path. We had some similar training, but I'd like to introduce you to Carl Greer. He's a Ph.D. in PsyD, and he's a retired clinical psychologist and Jungian analyst, a businessman and a shamanic practitioner, author, and a philanthropist. He's funded over 60 charities and more than 2,000 past and current Greer scholars. Well, that's really commendable. He just taught the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago and has been on the staff of the Repolo Center for Counseling and Wellbeing. He received his Ph.D. from Columbia University, and he was on their faculty teaching finance and management in their Graduate School of Business. You're quite accomplished man, and been studying shamanism for quite a while.
Yes.
And you were of that first wave of people who were, there was a whole group of, this is my observation, there was a whole group of men in, about 20, 25 years ago. And then it kind of really became really oversaturated with women. And now there seems to be a lot more men coming up in the ranks again. Have you noticed that at all in your work?
When I trained in shamanism, I would say there were probably more women than men.
Okay.
But it was interesting when I was studying psychology in the 1980s, there were probably more men in my program than there were women. And I know that's changed a lot. Just as an aside, the field of psychology seemed to have more women now in it than men when I was first training. You are in the business, as I understand it, of helping people change their everyday lives through being in connection with energies and ideas that they otherwise wouldn't be had they not done certain work. And that's kind of what I've tried to do. And in that workbook that you held up, I have a lot of exercises that are designed just for that. How can people bring their spirituality into their everyday lives and live a life that's more pleasing to them and spirit, however they define that. And it's hard because one of the reasons I think people don't is there's some part of themselves that resists change. And my book is helping them to get at those parts that are unconscious that keep us from doing what we want to do.
So do you think that you've woven in your ancestry of Jungian psychology, shamanism, and business into this book? Who would be most likely to pick this book up? A businessman or a shamanic practitioner or somebody who's just your average, God, I need a change in my life?
I would hope all of the above, certain of those groups, I found, Renee, I don't know, but you, many people want to change, but we live in a world where we like to have 10 rules for transformation and 10 aphorisms or, things we could say aspirational. But to do actually kind of time with yourself to digest who you are, where you came from, where you want to be, is a process that takes time and energy. Luckily, I've had reinforcement to what I do. Like I have enough people that have done it and been pleased and want to do more. But a lot of people don't want to do the work. And so my goal is all those groups, I'd like them to have a chance to, use the ideas. It's probably more shamanic practitioners, psychologists, analysts, that group that's already spent some time in the other worlds that are open to doing it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I find that that's true too in my work, that people say, well, you're a shaman. Why are you giving me this homework? Why are you, why is a vision map the thing that, you're adding into your wind work? And I guess short of, living in the jungle or living in nature where you're apprenticing with somebody, and what most people I find don't realize is all of these skills translate into how you live your life. Are you a giver or are you a taker?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if they don't translate into some change, then you can wonder, why am I doing it?
Well, I think we do it because, it's our destiny and our call to do it. And I'm writing in my new book this morning, I was writing about how, my call to service right now is I'm the board president of the water board. And if one was to look at it like, well, what does that have to do with your marketing background or your shamanic background or your book writing background?
Mhm.
And I believe that it has everything to do with how I live in relationship to my community. And so do you have community-based exercises in here, or is it pretty much all personal exercises? What is your thought about that?
Um, in my first book, I suggested things that people in community could do. In this book, I think it's amenable to people getting together and together sharing some of their experiences, doing some of the exercises. Uh, but I don't uh, stress that a lot other than saying it seems to work for some people.
That's great. Are you teaching groups with this work?
Not,
And
not
no?
anymore. I'm 85. I'm trying to uh, plan the rest of my life, doing a lot of things, and so I'm not doing workshops, and I'm not on the road so much like I might have been many years ago.
So 85, what are you planning for the rest of your days here? What would you still like to accomplish?
I have a few more things I like to write. I am, as you mentioned earlier, I'm involved with a lot of philanthropic things. I want to continue that. I want to have my succession plans in place so when I'm dead, that the people that I care about will be taken care of and carrying out some of the work I want to do. So the work I want to do between now and then is to uh, make a difference in as many lives as I can through the charities that I support. And it means to that end, I have to keep myself relatively healthy, both physically and mentally. And at 85, it's an ongoing process.
A friend of mine, she's 82, 83. We get a little blurred in those ages at that point, but she recently left her husband.
Hmm.
And I've been sitting with this, like, you're in it something for 40 years. You've been teaching, you've been doing this for 40 years. When you talk about inner transformation, I sent her to a therapist friend of mine, and I think that that's a really good point for me. And it's been a really great reflection for me that, wow, at 82 in my 80s, I can still change.
Yep.
And have you found that? I mean, do you find like the average age of the people that you've really worked with? Are there people coming who are a little bit older these days, or what are you finding for your own personal transformation and the succession plan that you talk about? Because a lot of people lately I've been talking to are talking about the succession plan, and a friend actually took me up to a cemetery recently because she was thinking about how she wants to be interned.
Yeah. Uh, well, meaningful reflections at this stage in my life. A little bit more than 5 years ago, I had all the arteries on the left side of my heart blocked. So I was
Oh,
within a day or two of not making it. I had bypass surgery. They bypassed them and put in new arteries. Sometimes they put in veins, and so that gave me a new kind of lease on life. But it also made me aware of my mortality. I had prostate cancer that got advanced, and so I had to have that I had to have that handled. I had some herniated discs in my back, which I have to, take care of. So I'm trying to, with those reminders of my mortality, uh, do things to, keep fit, exercise, and And, in terms of, I had a long-term relationship with my wife who died a year ago this month from acute myeloid leukemia. And so all these reminders of mortality have made me aware of the preciousness of life and what I can do in the time that I have to preserve what I have and have a meaningful existence. And I guess everybody answers what that means to them a little differently, but I'm in that process.
I'm really sorry for your loss with your wife. That's just a major cycle transition too, out of a long relationship. Although as shamans, we understand that the relationship it just changes form, but that doesn't help with the loss. So condolences for you on that.
Thank you.
But what I really find inspiring here in this conversation, which has kind of gone from your book, but not really, because it's these inner processes that we do that keeps us in the game, I believe.
Mhm.
Have you found that to be true? Like, did you have to lean in a little bit more to your inner work after a major loss or a major illness than you did at other times in your life?
Yeah, it made me more, yeah, absolutely. Just without a conscious shift, I'm just more available to it. And, I continue to learn from myself some life lessons, such as be more patient, be more tolerant. And you think at 85 you would have learned those lessons, but I guess we learned them all at the same time. And so the inner work that I have done, which is basically work that's in the book, has been more pertinent for me in the last few years just because of my life circumstances.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine yesterday, said something that stuck with me for the rest of the day. She said she's had to forgive herself for for the choices she made earlier in her life and for growing old. Did
Hmm.
you ever find that you had to forgive yourself for being human and having a mortality around yourself?
That's not ever kind of a thought process or set of experience that I've had. Uh, that's not been my experience so much.
Well, and she had made some, maybe some poor decisions earlier in her life that are affecting how she's aging. Like you eat a cheeseburger every single day, and then you get diabetes and you get a stroke type of thing. So what we fail as youngsters to realize is that all of these decisions we're making, because what goes in our body and what goes in our mind, are going to be definitely affecting us later on.
Mhm.
How would somebody use your book who was at that part of their life? And how would you suggest that could be helpful to go through some of these cycle? I don't know what cycle that would be, but cycle
Yep.
changes where the next cycle is the ending cycle.
Yeah. Uh, I think one of the things in my books that is useful for people if they do it is to conceptualize their lives as kind of a story. And so what is the story of your life at any one point in time? Uh, and then if you ask somebody that, oftentimes they say basically they tell you the story that they want others to believe about them. It's hard to really tell your truth. But if you're the only audience for it and you tell your truth, what is your story right now with all of its chapters of its health and relationships and money and jobs and et cetera, et cetera. And then you can step back and say, are you happy with that story? And if you say, well, some way and some not, and then say, all right, what are you going to do about it in the time you have left? Uh, and then say, well, I really can't do this because I need the money or I have to keep working. But so we all have our inner processes about that process. But one of the reasons is that we don't have a real good relationship often with those inner parts of ourselves. And you could call it your unconscious, you could call it the collective unconscious, but however you think about our relationship in the cosmos, there's energies that I think are available to us within that we just have to learn how to access. And if we do, it can free us up to do things that we hadn't been able to do prior. And I think anybody at any stage in their life can do that. I think we're compelled to do it more as we get older, because when you're young and you just think you're going to keep going forever, and that these early decisions that people make, drink too much, eat the wrong stuff, don't exercise, they still feel pretty good until they don't. So that's my thoughts on that.
So is there a process in your book here that helps people create the sacred space to actually go within? Is there a favorite process you have for getting people in that sacredness of themselves to take the time to do an exercise here?
In my own shamanic practice, I believe in the power of creating that sacred space and calling in, for myself, my traditions. I call in the energies of the directions to which I have certain things attached, and above and below. And I do certain things with my own energy field. And in my books, I suggest things that people can do to get in that space. And it can be breathing, it can be rattling, but also with intention to call in these energies to help do the work. So I do talk about that.
That's a really important thing. I just moved into a new home this week, and I was watching my cat this morning. She's only been allowed out in the back porch area, and she's been dying to get out front. So this morning, I watched her as she went out front, and she's drawing the boundaries of her property. And I think that people don't really understand the full impact of how important it is to set this space and time to do this work. And because we're moving through life so fast,
yes,
that we don't create, it's like the unimportant thing when everything else is more important.
100%. And at the micro level, just the idea we go so fast, but we don't have the pauses, and just to have the pauses to do the sacred work. But more than that, just in the moment, we have many of us, a robotic response to certain situations. If we could just pause between that situation and our response, sometimes we can do things that are better for us than we would habitually robotically do. And I talk about that, and I talk about how people can learn how to pause. And part of a bigger extent of that is what I think we're talking about now, being in sacred space and in timeless space and so forth.
And I think sometimes if you're, a more seasoned practitioner, we get this idea that we're living in sacred space all the time. Or we get this idea that, life is going along just the way that the dominoes are stacking up for me in my favor. And so for me, a lot of times it's like a disrupting thing where I'll say, okay, all right, I surrender, and I'm going to do a little more inner dialogue here. And for me, being a teacher, I'm very much like, I'm teaching a 5-week program and the dynamics of creativity right now. And last week I hadn't done the exercise that I had suggested for everyone else to do. And for me, that's really important to me, is that I participate in the experience with the other people, because I found in my own training that when people were out of integrity and they were preaching what they weren't practicing, it never worked for me.
100%.
Do you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah, that was a hard part for me, was like, like to really, when you walk in integrity, that means, you pick up the trash that's in the sidewalk in front of you, because how we do anything is how we do everything.
Right.
So what about nature? How do you see the role of nature in your work?
My thought is that's a big question. And,
Okay.
with a big answer. I mean, through my own life and shamanic experiences, I kind of believe everything's connected to everything else at some level. And, past, present, future, and nature and everything else. I think nature is a big energy. And I think as we can relate to it, we can be healed, but we also can heal it. And I believe that reciprocity in those all relationships has a value. So I think to be in nature can be very, very healing, and to interact with it consciously and start to develop a sense that nature is observing us just as we're observing it can be very powerful. And in my book, I talk about a lot of things that people can do in nature to help them get the energy and the insights to make changes in their everyday life.
And what's one of your favorite nature exercises?
Uh, I have places that I like to be. So
Mhm.
just to sit among certain trees, to lie down in the grass in certain places, to just sit with a cup of coffee in a favorite spot, to be in front of moving water and kind of meditate on the idea that where I put my attention in the river of life is where my reality is going to be. So, just to play with kind of playing in the fields of the Lord, just and being touched by the synchronicities that often happen. I can be doing something like that, and then all of a sudden I'll have a visitation from a bird or something that just seems it's just the right thing at the right time. And why did that happen? And then I'm left with trying to figure out what that is and what meaning I'm going to make of that. And is that going to, so it's just a wonderful, fun, uh, sacred, profound set of experiences. And by your smile, I sense you've done it also.
Well, I was just thinking about last week, I said I moved into this new house, which spirit aligned totally. I wasn't looking for a new house. And all of a sudden I was aligned to the water and to Orcas Island right in front of my window view. And the other night, here's that cat I was telling you about who was exploring her front yard. The other night, I was sitting in the jacuzzi. And it was like the first night that I was sitting in the jacuzzi when it was still a little bit light out. Well, all of a sudden, the leaves on the tree, and I'm still getting chills over it, on the other side of the fence started to talk to me, basically. They mostly shook a little bit. And I knew what they were saying is, hey, you've looked at every other tree in the yard, but you haven't given us any attention.
Mm.
And it like changed my relationship with that particular tree. And I made sure it got some water the next day. And everyone who's walked by the house that I've just bought said, you bought the happy house on the street. And the truth is this house called me because I came to the open house thinking I was looking for a friend who was looking for a house. And when I walked in, the Constitution Mountain, like, put a cord right into me, like, this is yours. This is for you, not mine. This is for you. And then everything lined up when I was ordering the reality to get this. And I think this is because, because of all the work that I've done over the years. And so I can't stress enough how important I think this inner work is. And that's why I invited you on here, is because I know that you've done that deep dive and really believe in the inner work is the way to heaven.
Yes. Yep. I mean, yeah, no, just so some of the takeaways I've had, from the work is that we all have a past that's factual, but we can change not those facts, but the way it lives within us and the way it affects us in the present. And I think the work of shamans and psychologists and analysts is to help people get to that place so their present decisions are less influenced by their particular past. But we as shamans also believe we have a future, and there's probably some ability we have to co-create that future with spirit, recognizing at the end of the day, spirit, thy will be done, but we can still interact with spirit to try to get our future in alignment. And once that happens, better alignment with spirit for our future, that affects our present decisions too. And to me, all the work that we do is just that, so that the present decisions we make are more pleasing to us in spirit. And the means to that end is just what I'm saying. And if one is willing to spend the time to meditate on those things, I think they have a chance of having a happier, more productive, more meaningful life than if they don't.
And I want to go a step further with this, and this is more for our advanced shamanic practitioners who might be listening, is that I believe that this view, this mountain and this harbor view that I just luckily just stumbled upon has been calling me for a long time, because years ago I had a Vedic astrology reading, location astrology reading, where he said you would do best by living by Orcas Island. And so when I went to visit Orcas, I didn't have that pull because it wasn't close to an airport, it wasn't this. But when I walked in here and had that direct sight line to Orcas Island, I knew this is what has been calling me. And
Yeah,
so to understand that the past is also influenced by the future that's calling you.
absolutely. Yeah. And to be in those flows and to respond appropriately. And sometimes we make mistakes, but at least we tried. And I think that's the beauty and the fun of life at any age, which I sense you're enjoying, and I am as well.
I think so. I do. I'm doing a walk to the Cotswolds in October, and
Mm.
some of the women who have signed up, because it's all women at this point, have been having these up against themselves experiences. And I said, that's because you've committed to yourself in the journey. Do you talk about that in your book, about how once you make a commitment to yourself, the wind, you're going to get wind slapped?
Uh, Not exactly like that, but I think I meander around those types of topics uh, in a variety of ways in the workbook. And certainly people that are going to do the work are going to 100% come up with those types of experiences.
That's true. So let's bring it back around to your book. How do people find you, find your work, find your books? And we're talking about this book today, but you have several books. So let people know where they can find you.
I have a website, carlgreer.com, that people can find me at. And, my books are on sale at independent bookstores and Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Um, and I don't do, as we talked about earlier, workshops now, and I'm just not out in the world promoting my ideas as some are, and what I might have done when I was younger.
And have you trained some protege who are doing your work and doing your workshops out in the world that that they can find people through your website, or how do we find people who, if we want to get more deep in a workshop with your work?
Um, I like to think there are a number of people who have been influenced by what I do who are out in the world doing it in their own way. In other words, there's a lot of ways to, I think, uh, get to the unconscious parts that can help us besides shamanism or depth psychology or Jungian things, like yoga or qigong or photo therapy, or just a lot of things that people do. And I have a lot of people that have worked with me that are out in the world doing those things. I can't think of, and I not wanted to kind of list them, but if somebody comes to me, sometimes I can think of somebody that might be uh, useful for them to work with. But again, at this stage, I'm hesitant to recommend others, and I believe a little bit that there's a hunt and peck process, that we find the right people that we need to work with, just like you found your house.
I love that hunt and peck idea. That's a great idea. All right, so one final question for you. So someone's feeling stuck in their old identity
Mhm.
or life story. What's the first step that you recommend once they get this book that they take to shift that?
Uh, have them be as clear as they can as to what their true story is for them.
Mm.
And that's number one. Then number two, what would they like it to be? And then number three, why isn't it like it the way they would want it to be? And so there's some reasons, well, I can't because of this or that or so forth. Then to kind of work with those reasons through the processes that I talk about, going to what I would say we all have an inner wisdom that we can access. And just as you mentioned earlier, the internal dialogues with certain energies and figures, to talk about that and how they do that, and to make that process doable. But it's not just the thing that you're dialoguing with. It's not just the part of you that's dialoguing, but it's also that third part that's making sense of it, listening to it both. And then at the end of the day, you hopefully have some more information that's going to be useful for you to make changes, more information than you had you not done the work. So that's what it's about. But a lot of times people are uncomfortable even doing that because they don't believe it. And then when they do it, and all of a sudden they get a big revelation, sometimes they're scared, to do it. So it's just, it's work, but it's doable. And there's been enough people over the years that have done it that keeps reinforcing me to keep writing books. And when I was teaching, and when I was seeing people, because I think it's powerful work, but it's not going to happen. You can have quick insights and quick changes, but to make it stick, it's been my experience, it's kind of a lifelong commitment to a new way of being.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I've had some of those quick insights in my life that have been like life-changing, like when I quit drinking, like shortly after that, the sky parted and I could see the blue of the sky for the first time clear ever. And I
Yes.
knew in that moment that I was probably never going to drink again. And this was when
Yep.
I was 30 years old. And so we're going 38 years ago. However, in order to stay that clear or to see that sky so blue, it required all of the kinds of work you're talking about, all of the kind of work that I teach, and it doesn't matter which path
Mhm.
you take to get there, but take a path.
Yeah. And have a relationship to those parts of you that help you stop drinking and that are helping you stop drinking now, whatever you think about, whatever that is. I mean, I'm not saying that was your process, but it is for some people I know. And it's a daily process, but not just to keep drinking, but to live a different kind of bigger
Mhm.
life.
And I think what you're talking about is really looking hard at that old story.
Yes.
That old story that, my dad died when I was the 2 weeks after the day after my grand opening of my restaurant when I was 30. My dad had a massive stroke and died a couple years later. And he was that story for me. And I thought I had healed that story. Just this is for people who think you've healed that story. Well, when Winds of Spirit came out, the year that it came out, all of a sudden, all of these new sisters and brothers showed up on ancestry.com
Hmm.
that were positioned between me and my younger sister. And, my parents were divorced, but still it was more of the story, the hidden story that I didn't even know existed,
Mhm.
that required deeper and deeper digging and deeping. So if you think you've done the work, get the book. The more you think you've done the work, get the book is what I tell people. You think you got it, get the book.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
well, this has kind of been a delightful and it's kind of gone on in various different ways. Is there one thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Um, it's a great gift to have the gift of being alive and being able to have conversations like this. And somehow, for all of us to uh, express that gratitude to the higher power, however you think about it, I think is meaningful. It's real, and it's an honest thing that uh, by so doing, you may get more connected to those energies that you and I have been talking about.
That's beautiful. And I foresee that you've got a lot of time left in this little next part of your life to really hone down how you want to embody your own wisdom and bring it forward into the next future generation. So I really want to thank you for being here, Carl.
Well, I thank you for that. And it was fun talking to you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.